Good evening, everyone. A few more people coming in, I'll wait. Hello, welcome. My name is Jane Conover. I'm the Vice President of Community Investment at the York County Community Foundation, and I'm really excited to see you all here tonight. Welcome to the second public meeting regarding Continental Square and the reclaiming of Continental Square. This is an initiative of the foundation and the beautiful York Endowment Committee. I want to thank all the committee members who are here tonight and thank our partners, Better York, who has helped fund this research and design process. So we had a meeting, our first public meeting back in June after months of talking to downtown stakeholders. And we got your feedback, and tonight we want to be able to share with you how we've responded to that feedback and how we're hoping that some of the concepts that are preliminary tonight, we can hear your comments, hear your feedback, so that we can take it back to the beautiful York Committee to continue to rework. So we are sending around a sign-in sheet, and we'd love to have you sign up so that we can keep you in the loop and invite you to future meetings. So please do that, and if you have any questions, let me know. I am going to be the scribe, and we'll be taking down your comments on the flip chart, and I'll turn it over to Frank Dittenhafer, our design and architect today.
Thanks, Jane. And I also would like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's beautiful outside. There's other things you could do. But this is great attendance. And I see some faces, some of you who were here at the first public forum, and I see a lot of new faces. Laura Kautz is my colleague, my design colleague from Murphy and Dittenhafer. And we both felt that the first public forum was just a fantastic session. You had a lot of things to say, a lot of excellent comments that were very, I think, informative and confirmed a lot of our thoughts, but I think articulated what you felt was very important to do or consider and not to do. So it was just an excellent session. We're real happy to be back here again. Our agenda for tonight is, I want to give a little recap of the June 13th public forum. It's hard to believe that was 3 months ago, fairly quickly, because we do want to roll out tonight some concept thoughts, and that's what they are, they're concepts. So, this isn't, we're not far enough along in the process to, know exactly what the manufacturer of a paver is or a certain type of light fixture. These are concepts, and we do want your input tonight, your reactions, questions, discussions. We could take some along the way. Do have a lot to go through. We'll try to keep things moving. There are a couple break points, but this is definitely for us to hear from you again. We hope that we listened well 3 months ago when we were here, because again, I thought you had a lot of excellent things to say that evening. So let's do a recap of the lights. Okay, we'll hit the lights first. A little better. A little recap of the public forum from June, and we talked a lot about the existing situation you're all familiar with. Great collection of different styles of architecture, buildings, a little more visible when the leaves are off the tree. One black glass contemporary building, collection of other infrastructure, 4 or 5 different types of light poles, vestiges of history like the trolley ticket sort of little pavilion, but more or less just an accretion without a lot of planning around what has become more of an intersection than really a place that is really focused on people gathering and utilizing. So we talked about the existing condition. We also gave, without going into extensive detail, talked about the history, which seems to be important to a lot of people, and it is quite rich, quite amazing, actually, going all the way back to the 18th century. When York was founded in 1741, the courthouse was in the center of the square. It was known as Center Square. And it was, York is the first capital of the United States, Articles of Confederation, lots of very interesting, important events happening in the 18th century, and some really great documentation, Louis Miller drawings and engravings and lots of great images of what was at the square in the 18th century. Markets, the first market houses were there next to the courthouse, and accounts of traveling theater companies performing in the courthouse and things like that. There's obviously a great book that could be written about the history of Continental Square. We also just, for our own curiosity, sort of mapped the footprints of history and the different configurations of the square. Again, the 18th century, something like this, the market, the courthouse, or the office building, the three structures that were there. Going into the 19th century, the courthouse was demolished, 1842. You see the larger market sheds that were there. Now have photographs, of those market sheds. And you, again, still really the center of commerce and activity, via photographs and horses and buggies and carts and things like that. Civil War period, York being incorporated as a city in 1887. Again, a lot of the buildings start to be constructed, that some are still there in the 19th century. Again, little tidbits, 1876, the square is too crowded with market vendors. And so the market sheds are torn down, and Central Market is built in 1888. Electric appears, and early at the late 19th century, you start to see the streetcars, trolleys. York loves celebrations, as Gordon Freyreich noted in his column. So you see, the arches celebrating the sesquicentennial show up in lots of photographs and other accounts. Again, sort of mapping the footprints of some of the things that happened, not everything. The market sheds, the second set of market sheds, the arches that showed up celebrating the sesquicentennial. You start to see, again, the streetcar lines crisscrossing Continental Square. And then into the 20th century, you again see the streetcars, trolleys, and automobiles and other vehicles. Again, still really the center of commerce in downtown York. Stores, other mercantile operations are there. The comfort stations, built in 1929. We'll talk more about those. The name of the square changes from Center Square to Continental Square in the 1920s. And again, there's a lot of photographic documentation of the buildings and what changed, from the different configurations and edges, where parking existed, where people walked, up until really what we have today, which was the current design essentially being completed in 1962, 1963, 50 years ago. There's been minor paving modifications and other things, but it's really a 50-year-old situation, that exists. Again, the comfort stations, one of the more unique elements, historical elements. It's been a lot of research on comfort stations done by some people. This is, we believe, the last remaining one in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They were quite common back in the early 20s and that time period. Some of you, I think, who were here last time, expressed you have seen them in years past when they were opened or operating. It's not just a piece of history, it's an amazing set of materials and craftsmanship, the brass and marble and nickel-plated fixtures and things like that are down there. But they're empty, and they're not a very nice place right now. What do you do with them? Again, you're into the early 20th century. There starts to be this, you're mapping the streetcars and trolleys, sort of a more vehicular, more transportation activity up again to the late 20th century. And essentially, this is the diagram of what exists today, with the essentially 2 planters with trees that have been there in each of the 4 corners, the pedestrian crossings, the stairs to the comfort station, the recent addition of the World War II memorial in the southwest area, and concrete with brick sort of around the edges. Yeah, sort of what it looks like. We all walk through it, we drive through it. We may not pay a lot of attention to it because it, again, isn't, except for special events, first night or street fairs. I mean, it's not necessarily the gathering place, was, or the center of economic, activity as it was historically. So, but again, some photos, of the square as it exists today, with leaves on the trees, sunnier day. Quite some wonderful examples again of a variety of architectural styles and buildings from the history of the square. We also, last time, we talked about, well, what are some of the things that could be considered in trying to recapture the square and make it more of an integral part of the downtown, a gathering space, a contributor to the economic vitality, things that could unify the space, such as leveling the intersection, or paving materials, lighting, signage. We talked about the possibility of highlighting the historic buildings, the architecture that's there, maybe changing trees, doing other things. What could be done to establish it more as a destination? Are there interactive elements such as water jet water features that would attract families or kids? Or is that the right thing? What would be the best way to handle special events, or buskers or musicians or artists, or attract restaurants, or should there be a visitor center? What needs to happen to create a more inviting space? Maybe higher canopy trees. We talked about changing the trees. Or what about umbrellas, seating, tables, plants and flowers, which there are at the square now. There's magnificent potted plants, hanging plants, add color. And we again talked last time about, with such a rich history in the city and in the square and in York, different ways maybe that the history could be woven into the square. So we got lots of comments from you. I think Jane had well over 100 sort of different comments we took the last time we were here. They were great, as I said. I want to go down, kind of tell you some of the ones that we think, this isn't the whole list of it, really seem to resonate, and I hope that they kind of illustrate as we roll out the concept that we were listening. That we heard loud and clear, the square, this should be accessible to all people, children, all types of residents, visitors, not just one segment, conducive to evening activities, not just daytime. Does need to be a real sense of place, back to the town center environment. It becomes more of a place to go. We need to create activity and vitality, that it's the heartbeat. It's more pedestrian oriented. Yes, there are going to still be cars going through the square, but can it be more of a pedestrian and safe place to be? It's identified as the town square, that it is unified, it feels like a town square. And highlighting the architecture, there seemed to be a lot of consensus. Why not? That could immediately change the perception of the square at night, obviously. And integrate the modern architecture. It's not just about past history. Are there ways to use the more contemporary, the black glass building, and bring in technology and progressive things along with the historical aspects? Use local art or resources. Consider really it being unique to York. That has to do with York's industrial heritage. To really think about trying to make it unique, to York. Again, establishing it at a destination, to give the community more reasons and families to come downtown. It's not just about beautification. Yet, Beautiful York is sort of the committee leading this effort, but it's not just about beautification. It really needs to translate into a destination for many purposes, many times of the year, as well as an economic development effort, that this is the place that you want to be in a storefront, you want to be renting space, you want to be living, in an upper level as well. It's not just about beautification. There were a lot of comments, again, about weaving in history, maybe even could current events be somehow communicated at the square. This I thought was really important. There were a number of comments that talked about keep it simple. Emphasize maybe the buildings or what's really the strongest elements. We don't need one of everything. Keep it simple, flexible. There were a lot of comments about the street surface, leveling it, or as they call tabletopping it, or about safety, curbs are better, coordinating that with utility work that some of the local utilities would want to consider. Can the paving tell its history? Water features. There was a good discussion about, is this the right place to have water features? What type of water features? Water features that engage children, recycle water, is a square just too small for that? Public art, everyone would seem to really endorse having public art here, but maybe not permanent. Maybe it's one of the places that art changes, and that's part of the attraction. The World War II Memorial, there's been a lot of discussion about that, and ending up with our charge, is there something we can do that's staying, it's not moving, there's something we can do to really enhance its presence and integrate it more into the square. Seating, I think, was again a very clear consensus of comments that seating ought to be movable. You ought to be able to sit anywhere, potentially at the square. Don't make it fixed. Don't have too many seating walls that are built in or planters. Don't sort of jam too many things into areas of the square that we can't move chairs and seating and have performances or be at different places at different times for events. Landscaping, everybody really endorsed the flowers, the plants, the color. Maybe movable, smaller was better than large, sort of not maintenance friendly, large planting areas. We sort of heard those kind of comments. Regarding entertainment, what we heard was having, again, flexibility for entertainers to maybe perform at different locations, not just one area with a built-in stage would maybe be preferable. Again, they said don't overdo it. There might be a couple times a year where there's a big event at the square and traffic is closed off from going through the square, but we shouldn't sort of overdo it just for those times of the year. We should try to have a more open, flexible approach. The comfort station. Seems to be a lot of interest in what to do with it. Now's the time if we are. Could it be repurposed as something else? It's important. Could we make it an asset, not a liability? Cafe, and there were other ideas. Again, there were sort of miscellaneous things. Yes, we should encourage entertainers, performers, lunch trucks, whatever, to be at the square, and that people want to be there because of all those types of activities, during the course of the day and year. And again, in terms of locations of things, there's a lot of discussion. I think we endorsed it. It was not always, well, what should we do? It was maybe what should we not do? We shouldn't overdo it. We shouldn't inhibit sort of gathering and flexibility. We should unify it. It's one area. Don't consider it four separate areas. Those types of comments we heard. And use sort of overlays maybe of things, and create sort of excitement. So, there were just great ideas and thoughts and comments that a lot of you were saying the same thing. So, I'm going to roll out some of our concept thoughts. And I've been asked a lot, well, what would be the first step? What's the first phase? Usually is the way it's said. What's phase one? What's the first phase? And that's not, I think, a simple question, but this is our recommendation of what the first phase, the step one, should be. And that is to really highlight the architecture that's there. That is the most authentic thing that is at the square. Historically, it's beautiful, it varies, the materials, the heights, the styles, and so lighting that architecture and highlighting it with uplights and downlights and lights at the cornices. It's something that could happen immediately. It will have a significant impact on the perception of the square locally and beyond the local area in terms of the buildings, the real estate values, the space. This could be done, again, independent of the major construction maybe happening for really the rest of the renovation to the square. And that this is something that you can see in lots of cities, lots of hearts of cities, and it's something, again, that we think could have a significant transformation of the perception right out of the gate as a first phase. Beyond that, our recommendation is, the reality is, it's not as if you're going to go to a second phase, well, let's do the northwest quadrant only. It doesn't really work well to do that. We think after that first step, maybe highlighting the buildings and unifying the historic architecture through lighting, there's essentially the rest of the project. And we believe there are layers to that. There's layers all interrelate, and we have to go forward and do it the right way, the best way possible, not do too much, but it is essentially probably one project that should be done at the right time. I'm going to present this sort of in layers. I'd like you to think of it that way, literally and sort of figuratively. As I go through some of this, I'll be talking almost from the ground up. But I think it's important that we sort of think about this with a couple topics in mind, like unify the identity, create an inviting place as a destination, and then integrating layers of history. This will make a little more sense as we go through it. But if you think about it in layers, I think that's really the best way, we believe, to visualize a concept that really recaptures Continental Square. So in terms of unifying the identity, this is what exists. Again, talked about that, seen the photographs, familiar with it. It's not very inspiring. What we recommend, again, as part of the second phase, starting point, is that we get rid of a lot of what's there. We get rid of the planters that are there, trees, some of the curbs, the crosswalks, the sort of proliferation of signs and posts, and lights that are there, with the goal of coming back and doing a much more exciting, much more cohesive, much more inspiring design for the square. So the starting point, with all that removed, is something like this. The comfort station steps are still here. The World War II memorial is over here. One thing we recommend considering is sort of pulling in from the existing curb lines, pulling in the north and south George Street curb lines or vehicular traffic lines, the equivalent of one parking space depth. That's already been done on Market Street. So this really puts more area for pedestrian use and other uses, and again, isn't sort of responding directly to this being the need to move vehicles through here, and that's really the primary purpose. They still can. I'll mention here, because it'll come up a few other times in our concept recommendations. We did talk and get some preliminary input from traffic engineers, so we aren't just sort of pulling things out of the air. So you're not going to see anything or hear anything tonight, although it's still conceptual, that isn't possible. Certainly studies, and there's more information. This is definitely possible. So pull that in, and then we recommend you unify the paving. Unify the paving with a really nicer material than primarily the concrete that's there now. We recommend that brick would be really the best choice. It's got warmth. It would be a definite color contrast to the concrete sidewalks coming into the square from all directions. It is real brick coming in along the edges. It's not stamped concrete, so we have brick, different bonding patterns of brick. There's different ways you treat the brick which has a concrete substrate underneath the whole thing. So it's not as simple as it may look. To do this, there's utility work and there's other things. This is really setting the stage in the right way for a lot of other things. But we recommend that you unify the paving, you bring it all the way out to the edges of the building, and it has really the feel of one place, not 4 different places or slices. Lots of examples of that, nearby, Annapolis and other places where you see one unified paving. And certainly see it in a lot of European spaces as well with other materials. And there are great sort of paving materials, granites, Belgian paver blocks, other things, which we think would be better used in York's Square as sort of accent paving, not really the entire paving of the area in those a little more expensive but very nice and equally durable or more durable materials. Again, this is something that's familiar, it feels good, it tends to broaden really the area that pedestrians are really trying to participate in. There's a lot of discussion, curbs or not curbs, and we recommend if there are curbs that they be granite curbs. It's something that is very durable, looks good, it's fairly common now and even historically, and it's something you've seen lots of places. So if there are curbs or where there are curbs, that's what we would recommend with the brick. But there can be a very strong case made to not have any curbing. That's more the kind of European piazza or plaza. It is a more seamless sense of the area, Continental Square or anywhere. You still have to should mark where the vehicular sort of lanes sort of go through the square. We are going to have traffic continuing to go through the square. Bollards can come into play, or something that plays the role of bollards, like plant flowers in pots and things like that. So this is probably the one topic I think where we've heard a lot on sort of either side, and maybe as there are places, the solution for York is a hybrid, both. Maybe there are areas near the perimeter where there are crossings that are curved and it's clearly marked, as you're required to for, say, ADA reasons and other things. And there are other areas more internal that it is a seamless paving at the same elevation, the tabletop approach, that gives us that really new, larger area perception of it with the same material, and markings. So we think maybe the hybrid, could be a really good route to consider. Along with that, this is all, again, trying to unify the identity much beyond what's there right now. There's still going to be traffic. There needs to be new traffic light standards. And did I talk about pulling back?
No, you skipped.
I skipped that. I skipped one thing I didn't talk about. Sorry about that. Yep. One thing that relates to the traffic, new traffic. One thing we talked about, and again, it's been confirmed by some discussions with some traffic engineers, and everyone I think we have spoken to likes the idea of pulling the pedestrian crossings and the traffic controls back further. Right now, they're sort of already into the square. You can pull them back really to the edges, the 4 crossings, which will be marked as crossings, be very safe. But we'll pull that back along with the traffic control, the traffic lights, back to the edges of the square. That is, again, that is possible, and it's something that we think would work well as we consider a better looking, traffic light standard. And there are, again, lots of examples of this. If they're a certain style, a certain look, I think all these photos happen to be in downtown Baltimore around Mount Vernon, which is an interesting public space. And you'll see all kinds of variations, of multiple light fixtures, traffic lights, no traffic lights. There's a family a nice integral family, and we could do this at the perimeter of the square. So this, again, the square is about people, not vehicles, is where we're trying to push it. And along with that, again, we like to think a lot of times if you do one thing, let's see if while you do that, you can do 2, 3, or 4 more that are all part of really a different approach. So along with that, this would be the time to consider some other maybe traffic modifications or signal modifications. Again, these are coming out of some thoughts, some questions you had, other people had, and discussions with early discussions with engineers. We've heard, well, it's a problem with trucks going through the square, trucks making turns even though they're not supposed to. There are ways, and the truck traffic could be rerouted around the square. That could happen. There is capacity. There is capacity, if we're moving signal lights and doing other things. There actually is excess capacity on the streets, a number of the streets around the square, from when George Street was made 2 ways, not that many years ago. So that happened, but if you really look at the engineering and the numbers and the traffic counts, there is capacity around the square to make some adjustments at the square. If it's routes for trucks, if it's the timing, because you can't sort of get through the square as easily or quickly as you could, or there actually would be a good time to make some adjustments. There are some lights probably you've experienced on George Street that could use a little tweaking. The engineer said this would be the time and the reason to tweak sort of some of the signaling around the square, that it all works better than what it is, and take care of some capacity or rerouting at the same time. And once we now have this really nice, cohesive, paved, unified area, to consider a pedestrian-only signal along with the other signals. What that means is, when traffic is moving eastward, I think what that means is there are signals that allow you to cross here and cross here. When traffic is moving north and south, or from the north and south, you can cross here at on Market Street. And those signals alternate. There is, and it's done other places, there can be a pedestrian-only signal added to the sequence where all 3 of these lights are red, and sometimes it's called, I think, a scattered sequence, and people can cross diagonally. They can go to any spot. That can be done. That can be done. This is not. None of these things are out of the realm of being possible, in a recaptured Continental Square. And wayfinding. Again, there's a lot of things sort of cluttering the square right now. We've heard, comments about, well, there should be wayfinding. If the square is the place to meet and gather, and then go other places, the square should help you, or help visitors, or should help promote what's happening on North George Street, or what's happening down westward on Market Street, to the Arts District at Beaver Street, to the Colonial Complex, to the Visitor Center, to other things. So wayfinding, I don't know if it really needs to be at every location, but maybe definitely at 2, northward and westward. That could lead into other sort of specialized sort of trails or walking. The square would be the jumping off point to get to other places, as well as a destination. So having wayfinding that looks good. It doesn't look like it just kind of came out of the catalog on its way to a suburban shopping mall. Something maybe that has the character and the design that is unique to York. If it's about the York's brand, the York's industrial heritage, this is maybe one of the places to do it. We have our own unique wayfinding, whether these are freestanding pylons or they're attached to new light poles or things like that. nice, high quality, good looking, wayfinding. And that would be sort of the starting point. I mean, I would glad to even take any questions right now specifically before we kind of keep going, or I can just kind of keep going. Yes?
Question about the pedestrian crossing lighting. If right next, okay, so let's say we're gonna do all this stuff and time it, but right now the traffic can pretty much stay the way it is. Is it just a matter of computer buttons to change it so 5 years from now when there's tons of traffic down there that we can do the crosswalks that you can go diagonally?
Well, I don't think it's that simple, and yet it is that simple. I mean, you have to really direct traffic and do the engineering work to know that there's capacity, other directions around the square, and do wayfinding and signage to route traffic that direction. It's sort of the concept which occurs in a lot of cities. If you want to go right down to the historic heart of a downtown, to their main wonderful square, sometimes the traffic is kind of congested. Well, if you aren't really going there, you might want to go around the square. Well, helping people, and there are other routes, there is capacity on particularly Duke Street to go around the square and get if you're going eastward, there are a lot of options to go eastward without going through the square in a vehicle. So it's easy, but not easy. The work has to be done to ensure that it works, and every component of it is in place. It's not just a matter of changing the traffic signals.
I guess I was meaning more about the infrastructure in the signals themselves and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty simple.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Moving one block away, what do you propose
Which direction?
for people who are coming north on George Street and they want to go over to the courthouse area to go sightseeing? They're not able to make a left turn on West Philadelphia during the day. Do you have any solution that you're proposing to address that?
Yeah,
It wasn't part of your mission, but...
wasn't part of my mission. I haven't asked that question, but I think what I've sensed is that questions like that and others about traffic around the square, not just in the square, this would really be the time to look at those questions and make those adjustments. It seems like you can do a lot, improve the traffic situation in the square, and you can also simultaneously make improvements, a block or 2 blocks around the square. So I don't have the answer to that, but I would certainly throw that question, in with that discussion and that investigation. Yes.
I got 2 questions. One, with the brick, I think it will look beautiful, but is there anything in place to deal with the constant traffic and freezing and thawing as the roads kind of settle? We've all driven down old cobblestone or brick roads that, after a couple of years, the brick kind of settles and moves with the tire tracks and things like that. Is there anything in place for that, or is there just better technology now, or is that something we're taking into consideration when
You have to do it the right. You have to do it the right way. You have to use the right type of brick. It's not stamped concrete that doesn't really look like brick. You can do it the right way. There are harder bricks for this purpose. The way it's on a concrete sub base first of all, and there are waterproofing membranes. It's a technologically engineered system for vehicular traffic, and the way the brick is bonded, has something. There's a lot of factors that go into it. That it's not like you're putting your patio, out there anyhow, or it's an old brick street, from 100 years ago that wasn't really designed for vehicle traffic.
So the design changes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as far as we did do either curbing or no curbing, things like that, do you think the railing of the comfort station, aesthetically wise, would that be smarter to kind of blend that in with the brick, or maybe go along with the granite? It seems like you're getting rid of everything in the square except for that old railing. Is there any thought to matching that to everything else?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yes.
I kind of have a piggyback question from hers. How will the rerouting to avoid the square be communicated to the community? Because I know that there are people who have grown up in York, but still try to turn left on West Philadelphia Street during hours that they can't.
Well, in fact, let me back up a little bit. We're throwing some of these potential traffic changes out as possibilities. You wouldn't have to do that. You could sort of do everything else we're talking about and not do the traffic changes. It probably would be similar to what I recall in recent years when George Street, South George Street, went from one way to two ways. I mean, for years and years and years, we came in, hung a right, went over to Duke Street, and then found our way back. I think, and until I was working on this effort, I had completely forgotten about those days. So I think there's a fairly easy way that the communication would occur if any of these were pursued. Again, these are just recommendations. So I thought I saw a hand over here. Yes.
Roger Brooks recommended making Market Street a two-way street. Any thought given to that?
We haven't factored that into our design. I know some of the discussion was definitely, I think, out on the east end. It could fairly easily, what I heard from people, there's a stretch, I don't know if it came into, how far it came into Queen or Duke or something. Yeah, it could be made two ways. We haven't factored that in as something that is necessarily, I guess, essential to improving the quality of Continental Square for people. I mean, that's really, I think, our focus. Although I seem to be talking a lot about traffic engineering, I want to keep going and get to more elements that really have to do with attracting people to spend time at Continental Square. That's really sort of the focus. So let me keep going here.
You have another one.
Oh, okay.
When you talk about your wayfinding, some of the pictures that you had were really aesthetically pleasing relative to what the buildings look like with the uplighting and that kind of thing. Are you in any way looking about wayfinding that would be interactive or be able to be changed?
Oh,
instead
absolutely.
of flat? I mean, they look like flat signs to me, but I don't know if that's what they were on your just signs.
I think what we're proposing as part of the concept is much improved, much and actually available where there's nothing essentially now. Wayfinding. It needs to be wayfinding. It needs to be flexible. It can't be a static. We need to redo it. It needs to look good. And technology is probably a big part of this. That we'll get to some things related to that.
Right.
I mean, we talked about wayfinding, a week or two ago, and we said there's probably an app for that. So incorporating technology into wayfinding or history or lots of other things that really don't show up on a slide, I think would be part and parcel of the concept.
I mean, it's very difficult to show it on there, but if you're trying to create a people-centric area and you want to highlight the historic aspects of York, and then you want to pull the kids in if you do your water thing or whatever, I just kind of think it would be neat, for lack of a better word, to have interactive, maybe kiosks or something, but have them look like some of the signage you had up so that they blend in and they don't look odd.
I
Like
think,
that black glass building that I've often wondered why it's there.
and I think
But anyway,
kind of paralleling what you're saying, you might have sensed that what we're saying is limit the wayfinding to what you really need and get a lot of return on the investment. Don't have a proliferation of wayfinding or what's maybe called wayfinding that it detracts from the quality of the space.
right, but have it work.
Right.
That's real great. Yeah. Parking authority needs to be brought into this in the sense that I know there's tons of parking already, but if you ask people why they don't come to the city, it's crime and and parking, and there is parking, and so, but I know the Philadelphia parking lot, no one knows when it's open, what it costs and whatnot.
You're right. The general authority and the parking folks, need to be, constantly looking at that. I mean, so if there's wayfinding related to where that available parking is, and the statistics are pretty clear. There's plenty of parking in downtown York. That might be part of
this kind of money. Whoever needs to pull in their ear has to.
that probably should
Someone has the
be.
ability to pull.
Yeah, don't forget about parking. So we need to create a more inviting place as a destination. And what are some of the elements beyond sort of somewhat the ground plane or the starting point, the next layer that we would recommend? Well, we do think you need trees. You need some shade. And we talked at the last public forum about the the different orientations. You need trees on the northern sides of the square where the sun shines. We don't need necessarily trees for shading, on the areas of the square which are primarily in shade all the time. So we are proposing, and very specifically, that there be new trees, 2 busts of 4 trees on the east and west sides of the northern portion of the square. These would be trees, I think there's maybe 1 or 2. These would be trees that don't have large planting walls around them. They're trees that are planted flush with the paving. You can pull tables and chairs right up under them, sort of like you're seeing here. They'd be the right species of trees. They could be like London plane trees, which are the types of trees down by the ballpark, as an example. Trees that are more linear, have a better canopy, they're a little more transparent. They're urban trees. They thrive in an urban environment. They thrive being relatively close together. And it's not just the London plane trees. It could be male species of ginkgos or honey locusts are okay too. Getting the right trees at the right place to provide shade. And our proposal also, we think this is the best place to do it. That's approximately where we recommend it, not against the building. They do sort of form even sort of a natural visual gateway to North George Street and all the things that happen on North George Street. So, we are proposing that there be new trees with, again, a more thoughtful approach to how, what, and where. We also think, again, that this will lead into some later thoughts, that keeping the 1 tree, not the planter, but the 1 honey locust tree on the southwest area of the square near the World War II memorial, might be a nice thing to do. It's fairly large. It provides, a nice sort of big canopy. The largest building on the square, the former Colonial Hotel, is in back of it. And again, you'll see later, we think there's a way to kind of integrate that and improve that in the right way, that in the bigger picture for that part of the square. So this tree was put in back roughly 50 years ago. It's sort of like the witness tree from the last time something significant was done at the square. Okay, it gets hit by lightning or dies, you plant a new tree. So trees, water. We do think, all said and done, all the comments we heard, that there should be water at 2 places at a reinvented Continental Square in the right way. One, we feel, should be an interactive water feature over in the eastern portion of the north side where the sun is shining, and is the type of water feature that really is an attraction. We show it that it can be located. These are the water jets. They are a magnet for kids and families. You've seen them lots of places. We could have some in an interesting sort of pattern in the paving. They're pulled 20 feet away from the building. They're not near the curb or the traffic line. There could be a few seating benches there for parents to be there with their kids. But we do think that our square would benefit by having this type of water feature. It doesn't cost a lot. In the winter, it's in the paving, it's flush. You can program it, control it when it's on, when it's off. It's winter time, it doesn't look bad or ugly like an empty pool or whatever. So it seems like really the right thing that we would benefit from the investment, at that location. Another element in that part of the square, this is the black glass building, by the way, in case you want. We think there are a number of things that can integrate this sort of more contemporary building on the square as a contributor, to the square. Obviously, you have to work with the building owners. But one thing that we know of are these transparent films. They're transparent. If you're inside the building and look out through it, they're clear. You don't even know that there's anything there. On the outside, they can be anything you want. If it's something about the Articles of Confederation or something patriotic or not, we think there could be, a portion, of this building. It could completely change, and all of a sudden it becomes even more of a highlight, during the daytime, of the square. It's relatively easy, to do. Doesn't impact the interior usage of the square at all. Another one that we think, and this does get into some technology, based things. We think there's a real opportunity to incorporate projection onto buildings, and even a number of you have talked to me about this. You've been places in the U.S. or Europe or other places where they've done this, and that we ought to have a sort of a very uniquely crafted, unique to York, industrial-based heritage, creativity unleashed, born totem pole, that is a sculptural element that has projection capabilities and music capabilities. And it too could project, onto the black glass building. You could have the film, and at nighttime, and the film really is sort of you don't really see it, so you can project, or it probably can project westward onto the Market Way West building as well. So having projection capabilities, which there are just wonderful things being done now, with this type of technology. I mean, you program it. Local artists, commissioned artists, there's all kinds of just great stuff that, the building that you're doing it on doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be all glass, it can be brick and traditional. We think there's a really great opportunity to do that. Here's a little.
That was a little ordinary,
We have a real, just like a minute and a half sort of little video of some of this. We thought we'll try to use our technology to show it to you.
Yeah,
There, not just on your computer.
it's played in the square.
Right.
And it's all custom made for whatever building you have. The music was made for this.
Franklin, when that's being shot up on a building, people, the tenants inside affected by the light.
Yes and no, not really.
Is that expensive? Real expensive? That's reasonably priced.
Depends what all you want.
To consider reasonable, it's very cool.
Sometimes this is even, you can have artists there on the ground doing this, or local people drawing show up. So it's sort of limitless possibilities. So.
Yeah, we want that.
All right, but we're not done yet. Let's see the whole shopping list. No, it's not shopping. You got to buy everything. So those things we were talking about over here on the eastward, northeast sort of area. What about the War Memorial and the existing honey locust tree? We think this is the other area where really would benefit by another sort of much quieter, more contemplative water feature. And we would do that, we would sort of knit the tree, get rid of the planter, build a new sort of stepped planted area with nice colorful seasonal plantings, a seat bench sort of stepped area you can sit on. This actually is the quadrant that has the most slope to it. I mean, it's severe actually going along the buildings where there are entries into the building. So we think this is probably an area where we would take advantage of that by sort of having a higher back wall with water streaming down it. You just would hear it. I mean, the idea of water isn't just seeing it, it's hearing it, sensing it. So what kids playing in the water jets here is one thing, and there's sort of interesting relationship. Over here is almost the opposite. It's a more contemplative, quiet, respectful, knitting together of what's in that space. The World War II memorial, the water sort of streaming down, a surface. Maybe the back of that surface is utilized to tell stories about history or people. So there's a way we think to have a much more integrated approach to that whole area with water, with the World War II memorial, a place to sit and spend time and look at the rest of the square. Tables, chairs, and umbrellas. If you're establishing a destination, you better be able to sit down and spend some time there. So they're essential. They're the idea, as if you were here at the first public forum, pretty emphatically expressed, loose tables and chairs. You can move around. You can move them all off one area, move them to another area. Primarily, I think we feel these are probably two of the better areas on the north side for tables, chairs, and umbrellas. And cities, cities even nearby, Baltimore, there are groups. They have programs, table and chair programs, or tables and chairs out in public spaces, and organizations, take response. They chain them together at night so they don't move and go any place. So it's done. It's not again an idea that isn't readily achievable or creates unnecessary responsibilities that aren't able to be accommodated. So we think anywhere essentially. And we had drawings where we had tables, chairs, and umbrellas in all four areas, and maybe that will happen. It's better if you're starting out to not have too many, that they're empty, but to have enough and that people use them, they're full. Speaking from my York Central Market experience, when we did the Philadelphia Street seating area inside Market, there were people saying, I don't know, that's a lot of tables and chairs. If you go in there Saturday morning or Thursday at lunch, they're all filled. I can tell you, that's what will happen here. People will fill up the tables and chairs. They'll want to spend time talking to each other, eating or listening to musicians that are there, wherever. There could be tables and chairs anywhere. Maybe you don't need umbrellas, over in this area if you have some places to sit. And, maybe one area, again, you could, but maybe you're trying to focus the seating on maybe 3 out of 4. It adds a lot of color. It'll tremendous. It's so simple. With the wonderful buildings as a backdrop, the unified paving. Tremendous difference, from what we have now. Again, you see this lots of places. Flowers and plantings, yes, we have them now. I think the change we would recommend was more. Can we scatter more pots, not just at the corners like bollards? Can we have more pots sort of scattered throughout the seating areas of all 4 areas of the square? Not too many, but enough that they're the great color, the great kind of vibrancy that we get is even pervading the larger area. I'll keep going and take more questions. And the last layer that I want to talk about is history. How could we integrate layers of history? There's this tremendous history of the square. and in York. On a very simple note, there are currently 5 state, Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission historic markers at the square. You may not even notice them. They're just kind of scattered, although I think 3 or 4 of them actually have to do with a specific event, a specific location, and need to probably stay, in or near that location. And we are, I think we might have mentioned this at the last public forum, we can move these and relocate them. That's okay, with the state. If we wanted to dismantle them and, put them on the ground, that's something else, but we're not proposing that. But they ought to be relocated, that they really are more obvious. They are specific to the place. So the one that is specific to this place, it isn't buried in the trees, it isn't buried, with the street lamps. It's maybe at the edge. It's at the right spot. So there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, and maybe the other 2 that aren't as site specific. They're at the right areas. They're not sort of in the middle at the wrong place that inhibits flexibility and use of the square. They have a little more dignity and prominence. We propose to relocate, it's sort of that same vein. Let's relocate this wonderful restored, trolley, ticket booth, streetcar ticket booth. It has moved around over time. If you look at the photographs, you will kind of see it move a little bit here and there. We think the best location would be to move it over to the southeast area in the foreground, and put it in a position that it could have a more active utilization. If it's the place where you're meeting for tours of the historic sites in downtown with Heritage Trust people, or you're meeting with other groups. I mean, it might really have more of an integrated level of involvement and be more visibly prominent. It's a wonderful little structure, but it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And the comfort station, which again, there's a lot of discussion about the comfort station really being the restroom areas that are below grade, which had, because this is in the time when there wasn't really yet indoor plumbing or much indoor plumbing. It wasn't really typical. There were multiple fixtures, men's and women's room and other functions in the comfort station. We recommend that the comfort station be reused, repurposed, and that we do it in a way that we protect it and control access to it with a above ground glass pavilion. And that's what you see the outline of here. That it be a very minimalist, glass walls, simple roof. You need to go through a door to access what's below grade, but we preserve and repurpose this part of our history in a way that it works with the greater activities and possibilities for Continental Square. What is it? What are the possible uses? Well, it could be an information kind of kiosk and counter. It could be a one-person volunteer staff sort of place. This is really pretty small. It could be really leased out to a purveyor as a retail establishment, coffee bar, juice bar, something. It could have historical exhibits. There's this great history of the square in York. Local artists have already commented that this would be a great place for local York artists to have sort of exhibit or have a presence to send people to other studios or to Beaver Street. Given that it's a glass sort of transparent pavilion, or all of the above. All of the above. Maybe it changes. Maybe it's very flexible. Our idea is to utilize a enclosure, roof, walls, doors, as a way to really activate and reuse what's below grade. Again, it's a phenomenal piece of craftsmanship down there. The materials, the doors, that are down there. Now, I think I counted up to date. Do we need 78 fixtures? No. Would there be good use for a Times restroom facility? Yeah, probably. But that's really not the reason the comfort station was built. Would not be the reason I don't believe, we don't believe that you sort of repurpose it. It's maybe part of the story. If you take one side where, again, plumbing is there, fixtures are there. It wasn't that long ago they were opened up and utilized, for, I think it was first night or something. If you take one side where the plumbing and the fixtures exist, you can fairly easily, convert it to a women's and men's room, and then repurpose and utilize, reuse, restore using the components that are down there for one side. So there is this reuse, preservation of a part of our heritage, of our history, as unique as it is, but that's not really, the whole story of what we're doing here. We are doing that. We are preserving it. We will have operable, accessible restrooms, but maybe the rest of the lower level is really available for, if it's leased, it's leasable area. If it's a gallery, it's gallery space, or whatever. It's flexible. It's only 900 square feet. And above, the footprint above that we're showing, although it could change, our approach is this ought to be as minimal as possible. Pavilion, it's not a big building. That's 1,250 gross square feet. If you subtract out the stairs, and the bicentennial memorial elevator, it's only about 550 square feet of space up there to lease or utilize, in the diagram we're showing. So the approach, I guess, we would advocate is to make this as minimalist a structure as possible, but the right size that it could accomplish activities and purposes that don't exist at the square. And this would be, again, a element that's new. It's new, that is adding to a lot of the history that is already there. The little lift, it doesn't even have to be a big elevator. The lift that could provide accessibility or movement of goods between two levels. It can have LED lighting around it. It could be easily programmed to look differently different times of the years, holidays, Halloween, or the end of the year holidays. We also think there could be, if it's sort of an information center, there could be a small ticker on one portion of the wall. If you stand on the west side of the square and look across to this area, it is a tremendously visible point for pedestrians and people in cars going eastward. Sort of a ticker just at the cornice, telling about what's happening in York, what's coming up, that type of thing, we think could have a tremendous impact. What it could look like, if you sort of forget about the wood beams here, the idea of a large pieces of glass, transparent pavilion that you can look through. You're not obscuring the historic buildings or reconstructed buildings, but you can look through, you can see what's inside if it's a sort of customer service desk at the upper level or an art exhibit, you can see it. And you also can see, these are very historic buildings, you can see the environment around it. And then finally, you saw some of those early diagrams where we sort of mapped the history of what's happened at the square, the boundaries of the square, the buildings that were at the square. If you kind of overlay all of this, and there might even be more, it kind of looks like an Etch-a-Sketch gone wild or something. But we do think there's something to this. And maybe you have to abstract it or you have to be a little more selective, but we do think in the ground plane there would be a very nice opportunity to sort of have the layers of history, the story of Continental Square implied and told in the ground plane. That would be the place, we think, to use some of the more expensive and different materials, granite paving, bluestone, Belgian paving blocks. Because some of them might be related to footprints of buildings. Some of them might be sort of related to arches, edges of when the square was a certain size at a certain century, or something about the streetcars. So there's a lot of things, a lot of possibilities we think that should be considered in the ground plane in decorative paving rather than just kind of coming up with, oh, let's do bands of different materials and do it sort of without any basis. So we think there'd be something to consider here. So if you look at everything we talked about tonight, in plan view, and we're keeping it in plan view right now because we're talking just about concepts, the big concepts, the big ideas, what to do, what not to do. This is what it sort of looks like. History. You even see the history in the ground plane. You see the other things we talked about. You see a fair amount of open area. That's intentional. It's the beauty, the value. The quality of this is not, we feel like a lot of you did, not how much you do, it's what you don't do and how much flexibility you leave, and what you do is done well and in the right place. So again, history in the ground plane, you might see some of these materials, you might see stories, you might see history, historical events, quotations, that type of thing. So it's a lot of ideas, and going to throw it open for questions, more discussion. So. Mike?
I saw in the water jet scene you had there that there were short wooden benches, and I really like that a lot more than the walls, mostly, unfortunately, due to sleeping of individuals. I think that would be more restrictive in that way.
All right.
And they look good.
Want it to look good.
Would this be done in connection with Lake McBride as far as septic? Well, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but yeah, the benches and all that stuff, so that it is not conducive to crime and stuff like that. I mean, that would all be tied together.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
We even talked about that the whole concept for recapturing the square is that it should follow those principles, the septet principles. It's more visually open. There aren't areas that someone can hide. You aren't creating big barriers. So it's consistent with the openness and the flexibility that we think is the right thing to do. So we talked with Blake and others, and that absolutely is the thing.
One more question. Who's going to initiate this? Who has the authority to say, if I said tonight, man, I love that, let's move forward. I realize there's a lot of money to be raised, but someone finally has to have a final say. Who is that? Is that
Beautiful Jane can answer.
Yeah, the Beautiful York Committee is initiating it, but you're right, we will be doing our due diligence to meet with the mayor, the city council, other people to get their endorsement of it before we would go forward. Jim Gross from the city of York is a member of our committee, and Tom Landis is a member of the committee, so they are very integral to any kind of rollout for this. We couldn't do it
I'm
without
sure you know that York is the city of plans. And,
I do.
And is there like a deadline, like we're gonna agree to do this, start doing it by a certain date, or we're gonna just
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, let me just say that this project grew out of a plan that the Beautiful York Committee put together with the community in 2006. And out of those 29 ideas in that plan, 21 of them are either in progress or completed. So we're doing pretty good at the ratio there. This, I think, has a good start, partly because the Beautiful York Endowment means that we have ability to make grants every year. And so we already have a pot of money to at least get started on some of the first phases of this that could create momentum for more. The answer to your question is it's not going to sit on a shelf.
promise.
Yes, I'm on TV, I think I have to.
You had brought up earlier about the lighting, the uplighting of the architecture. How far out would that go? Would it just stay in the square, or would it continue down George Street or Market Street? How far out were you thinking?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, some of these buildings wrap, around the square and kind of go beyond the square. And I think our thinking was we probably would need to do each building in its entirety that has faces the inward on the square, but maybe does go beyond it. So I think, yeah, it would leak around onto West Market Street or North George Street a little bit, so that the buildings identified are all consistently lit. As you're approaching them, that would be, pretty nice to see.
And then, I may have missed it, but I don't see any, I see the street lights for traffic, but what about lighting within the square other than the uplighting of the architecture?
Well, our proposal is on those same poles, as opposed to the cables, or across the Market Street and George Street with the traffic lights on. We would integrate the lighting for pedestrians and safety on the same poles. And see how much we can do from those poles. We haven't done the lighting calculations. We've talked to some lighting consultants, and we can do a lot from sort of 4 locations. We may have to find a little bit more, but the
There's
idea,
only 3 holes.
there would have to be a 4th, you're right. There would be a 4th pole, it wouldn't have any traffic lights. So the idea is to try to do it from as minimum number of locations in a safe way, in addition to the building lighting, so that you don't have the proliferation of lamp posts and different styles of lamping that's there right now.
Building lighting.
The building lighting will go a long way. Yes.
Are you thinking about eliminating parking closer to the square and not, are you considering diagonal parking?
The only parking spaces, it's not many, would be in the initial sort of this area of South George Street and the same area on North George Street, where there are some parallel spaces. It's not that many parking spaces. That's the only place that parking would be, we propose that be eliminated. So we don't have cars parking within what we want to be really the pedestrian program area for people in the square. So another, yes.
Is there any thought or value to moving not the one fountain, but the kids' kind of play fountain over to where the comfort station area is, just on the grounds that there's potentially already plumbing and drainage there, as well as you already have access underneath of it. If something does go wrong, or you need to fix something?
Well, one of the primary reasons is this is a quadrant area of the square where the sun, is really shining for a lot of the day. We don't get that much sun over here. It is a good chance, we think, of this being one of the more activated areas with people sitting under trees and in that quadrant. It seemed maybe a better place to do it. Maybe if we're going to proceed with an idea of the pavilion and sort of leave this a little bit neutral for other things to happen there. Because I think where it is, it will really be an attraction. It really will be a magnet. Okay.
Is it possible to get a link to that video, the sample video? Try to get some people excited?
There's a lot of them on there.
Yeah.
Well, it's a flex.
Urban Screen.
Yeah, it's a company called Urban Screen.
Urban Screen.
Yeah.
I was concerned about the historical markers, and I think, yes, it does make sense to move them back. There are 3 of them that are quadrant specific. But a lot of people, I didn't realize how many people do kind of collect historical markers, besides, the local people that wanted to know. A lot of history happened in that square. But the Pennsylvania Historical Museum website, but then there are other websites, nonprofits, private websites that, tell about our markers. And in fact, I think eventually all the over 2,000 markers, there are some of ours now on there, the Explore PA history, which gives you a much longer backstory. And WITF just this year rolled out an app that you can get through their website, and that'll take you directly to that. So, talking about technology, while you're standing in front of those markers, you can find out a lot more
That's
about
great.
what happened.
Michael.
Speaking of the historical side of it, I didn't see any follow-up with a little more informational stuff. We had done some discussion about maybe historical signs that could be changed over time, so it's not always the same thing. Didn't really see anything, and obviously I don't want to clutter up everything with signs. However, we're still missing just this huge part of our history where John Hancock and Sam Adams and John Adams were all walking around in this square. And I mean, this is national and international stuff that is not on, even on our markers.
I can't speak for people like Joan Mummer, but I know I've heard, she said to me that she and the Heritage Trust are very interested in sort of living history possibilities at the square, people in costumes, not just sort of static or even technology-based things. So, you know, what happens over here? I mean, I can see lots of opportunities out here, in here, telling some of the phenomenal stories that go back into the 18th century, but also I kind of like what Joan had to say, I know she's here tonight, about sort of not trying to do too much and leaving it open for you know, living history or the programming that organizations like the Heritage Trust would want to do at, you know, different things at different times of the year. So we sort of pulled back from anything permanent. Maybe.
Right, I guess I'm not bought into that thing yet, so I was thinking of something.
I'll just add a couple other thoughts that have come up, Michael, in different ways, is that if there is some display here, is there an opportunity for display there for history? The other thing is the programming of the projections onto the sides of the buildings. That art could be anything, it can change. So that could also tell a story, I think.
What's in the paving?
We talked about over here, and this water feature incorporating some language and history there. So we don't know exactly what that would be, but I hear what you're saying about need to.
Bill.
I almost hate to bring this up, but I think it needs to make the list, and that you may want to give some consideration to some sort of design standards so that once you have this thing in place, the continuity of it is maintained, and not having a Lone Ranger come in. You know?
I mean, like our past history.
Well, it's just, I think you got to give a little thought to actually how you're going to work this thing. Because it is private property all around it, so, you know, there are individual decisions that will be made at some point in time.
If there's a kind of public process for making decisions about this square, kind of what Jeff was talking about too, and, you know, being consistent. Yeah.
Right.
Kind of along the same lines as what Mike was asking. When we, or if we do the special bricks indicating what was there, is there going to be something that tells us what that means? Or is it just going to be gray brick in the middle of brown brick?
No.
Okay, cool.
The story,
I don't like to know what's.
I mean, I gave you this, you know, Cliff Notes, you know, version of the history. I would love it. I think lots of people would love it if there's a place you can maybe stand. Again, I point to this area over here, maybe outside or inside, and you can see the Louis Miller drawing. You can see the photographs of the market shed. You can see the old Wagner engravings and the story of the history of the square, the buildings, the people, transportation, the mercantile changes. I mean, I think that absolutely is there, and then some of those lines and decorative elements mean something. So when you walk diagonally across the square, you sort of know what you might be.
And then, kind of building off that, if I may, could that then be jumping off point to then go down towards the courthouse and
The Colonial
maybe,
Complex?
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
Colonial Complex. I like what Boston did with their little
Freedom Trail.
Yeah, or
I mean, that's-
footprints or something
I mean,
to direct people. I know it's outside of the square.
Well, but it's come up, and we endorse that. We, you know, if it has a starting point, you know, there's wayfinding. This is the starting point is at Continental Square, and it takes you know, down to the Colonial Complex, and you know, it is something it's not shown here, but there could be something in the paving, whatever it is that's unique to York, you know, different but similar concept to Freedom Trail type things. Absolutely. Yes.
Right, I know it's still very early on in just the conceptual process, but just thinking about sustainability once all these projects and stuff are done, have you guys outlined anything, or are you at least thinking that far ahead?
we almost had a slide for that, but we were getting too many slides because we think this ought to be completely done in a completely sustainable, green, responsible way. We collect the rainwater. We use the rainwater to irrigate the plantings. We talked about, can we have all the lighting on the poles with photovoltaics and solar power? Can we on the pavilion have the pavilion, if it's there, powered as small as it is, in a sustainable green way? So it's an overlay that we think absolutely is part of this project that we just didn't take time to talk about tonight. Glad you brought it up. Yes.
He said sustainability. Of all people, I thought financial sustainability.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And not green sustainability. So,
That's not shit for you.
I don't counsel too long.
Well, I would say this on the financial sustainability. I mean, I would sort of indirectly make this comment that there's intentionally a degree of simplicity to this and a degree of kind of making it easily maintainable, making it flexible, not trying to do so many different things to take up so much area that are so specialized with so many different trades or follow-up financially or maintenance-wise or other. That's intentional. I mean, I think our feeling is this is achievable from a financial standpoint. It's sustainable, and it's exciting too. It isn't just about what happens on the ground plane. It isn't about how big of a water feature it is. It might be about how exciting the projection capability is that some artist locally is going to be involved in, and there's 200 people there watching him do it someday. That may be the type of thing that doesn't have enormous maintenance and sustainable aspects to it. So that we're thinking about that. We don't want this to be a sort of a financial noose around anyone's neck.
Yeah, just water features and glass buildings. The only two things that
Well, the water, I mean, these are pretty simple, low cost elements. So they're not, there was a comment made, I think, previously about plumbing and utilities. When we tear up the planters and the trees and things that are there now, you can easily run new water lines or whatever. In fact, Jeff Hines is here. I mean, they're looking to make improvements to the water company's lines if this goes ahead, but it'll be fairly easy. It'll be wide open, to go ahead and make utility changes to new locations or upgrade existing ones with whatever it is, if it's power, electric, or if it's water or storm drainage, those types of things. So, yes.
Having said that, all those things, do you have any notion how long the square would be out of commission? I mean, would it be sort of torn up for over a summer or for an extended period of time? Have you got any notion at this point, Frank?
We haven't. We're actually, as we speak, getting some preliminary conceptual feedback from some contractors who do this type of work. The square wouldn't be out of commission. I mean, there would still be, it'd be a major sort of disruption, occurring. But traffic will still have to go through it or be rerouted at certain times. It's going to be complex, and we are going to sort of think through that a little bit. But the idea is, I don't think that we're going to take the square out of commission for a long period of time. This might be, as there are with other places around the city, if you're doing major work, there might be lane closures, or you might have to reroute traffic around it for certain times when you're doing certain types of work. Yes.
Frank, you mentioned earlier, I think, musicians, that like they could be playing on one corner where the seats are. Have you looked at the possibility if there was, a big blowout stage and a big entertainment, that could fill the square with people? Would that be on that south? Yeah.
Yeah, when there's the big, first night event or big blowout, I think our thinking is, I guess it happens sort of in that vicinity, now or has, that, it would sort of span, across the traffic lanes. It's a big stage. It probably is occurring over here.
And I realize they probably bring generators in for those
Right.
things, but, so you don't need to worry about.
Well, our thinking is we're going to plan that the power is available. It's available in all areas, even if it's not the big event. What's reasonable to incorporate while we're doing this work for the smaller, events where you might need some power, that type of thing. Because we'd like for the, small groups, small performances, buskers, whatever, we'd like the possibility for that to happen, almost anywhere, but not sort of let the 1 or 2 times a year, or maybe it's more, but a few times a year big event kind of drive too many things. We'll plan for it though.
Kind of along those same lines, I was thinking of plugging in a laptop, but would there be Wi-Fi available in the
I wouldn't know why not.
Is there already Wi-Fi? Could you put in plugs and plug in like the Zero? Just saying, you're gonna power outlets?
We're not gonna need them right now.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel. You're not going to need to plug in anything.
But no, that's about.
Bike racks.
It's a good thought. There's one other thing I'm surprised that someone didn't bring up. Someone brought it up a couple weeks ago. Trash. We want to have maybe a creative, way to, unobtrusive way to deal with trash and recycle, and not have a proliferation of, ugly containers just all over the place. So that's on our list. Again, we're conceptually at this stage. Trash, bicycle racks. Yes.
All the pretty umbrellas and the water spout and everything, did you give any thought to what we do for the winter when the snow comes?
Well, in the wintertime, the umbrellas, you could have the tables and chairs, into the fall. We sort of talked about that, or early spring. The umbrellas might go into storage, someplace. And then in the wintertime, probably the tables and chairs, go into storage.
I mean, what would be the attraction for the square in the wintertime?
Well, I think, again, lighting the buildings, just having, the visual impression of the paving, maybe the projection, some of the things that aren't there now, pavilion, it's not for those, 2 or 3 pretty brutal, winter months. Again, I think the lighting is a big element, and just absolutely improving, the clutter and other things in a more organized, unified, attractive manner would probably go a long way. Still could be, obviously, events that take place, like first night, in the winter time, but, making it just a much more, I think, available, attractive place without tables and chairs.
And the projector.
Projector could be going on.
Are the grounds be heated so that when the snow came?
No, I don't think they would.
I was thinking about what you were saying about those stories in the paving.
That's a good thought. I mean, talk about the radiant heating that would melt the snow and that type of thing.
They,
City plows.
yeah, they do a very good job of keeping the square clean now. They really do. That's a priority.
I want to go back to trash. Being a major problem in the city. I just read that Disney has a trash disposal available every 27 steps, because that's what their studies show. People will not carry anything for more than 27 steps.
Okay, gotta be available and convenient. You're at your limit, Mike, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I don't think that the geothermal heating thing is too far out there. It would be interesting to look at the numbers of the cost, the long-term cost of the plowing versus basically a one-time geothermal deal, just like you do in geothermal houses, run them under the floor. Interesting idea.
Make a note.
Look at the numbers.
Any other thoughts? Is this on the right track? Is it totally off base? I mean, any global sort of reactions? Thumb up. All right, that's good to see.
Very, very well done.
A hand up. Okay.
Frank, it's a home run.
Okay, great.
Very
It's good to hear that. Okay. It's a decent concept. Okay.
Very exciting.
Frank, the people here need to know too, like Downtown Inc. has somebody who's trying to get those, this is nothing if those buildings aren't then occupied.
Well, this is supposed to help.
And that's what I mean,
That's
yeah,
right.
I mean, and there's also, I mean, like, you know, what I deal with the umbrellas. Hopefully there's a business there functioning now that's doing ice sculptures in the winter or something to attract other people. And so, you know, now you get these buildings occupied, it's up to the business owners and the building owners then to do their part as well.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
so
this is a
it's
place
one
you-
hand feeds the other.
Place you want to be because it helps your business, and you know, there's ways you can help yourself. You know. Okay, well, any other comments or questions? Thank you very, very much.
Long time no see.
What did you think?